Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. At the time of recording this video, we're about 4 hours or so away from learning whether the Supreme Court will allow Nicola Sturgeon to hold yet another independence referendum. However, Jim Sillars, the ex-deputy leader of the SNP, has come out and said that he hopes Nicola Sturgeon loses her case. Is all well in Scotland? Is all well in the SNP when even its ex-deputy leader wishes Nicola Sturgeon to lose? Is Nicola Sturgeon's time coming to an end? Is she losing her grip? Will Scotland's reign of error finally be over? Let's look at this article. So, Nicola Sturgeon won't win a Scottish independence referendum, even if Supreme Court judges rule that she can have her glorified opinion poll, says former SNP Deputy Leader Jim Sillars. He hopes Nicola Sturgeon loses her battle to hold the vote. The Supreme Court will today announce whether the Scottish Government can call an independence referendum. Mr Sillars slammed Ms Sturgeon's referendum plans as a glorified opinion poll, and he added that she wouldn't win as there's not enough core independence vote. And there isn't, because most people in Scotland know it's better to be a major player in a small team than to be a minnow in a very large team. The voice will be diluted. And of course that's what will happen, because the very first thing that will happen after Scotland wins its independence will be to give up its independence when it joins the EU and becomes just yet another tiny country in this vast superstate. So that call for independence is quite clearly wrong. It's not a call for independence. What drives Nippy is not the thought of an independent Scotland. It's the thought of having no English having a say over Scotland. That's what really grinds her gears. And it's her blatant anti-English bigotry coming to the forefront, because she doesn't care about Scotland and she doesn't want Scottish independence, because an independent Scotland would have to stand on its own 2 feet, and she knows Scotland's not big enough or rich enough to do that. Whereas if she goes and joins the EU, it does give her all that extra income as being one of the most impoverished states in the EU, and so is entitled to a lot of money, and that's the only way she can continue in power. So they're starting to call her out on it. So Nicola Sturgeon will not win a Scottish independent referendum, regardless whether the Supreme Court rules she has the legal power to call one, a former deputy SNP leader has said. He hoped that the UK government would win its battle in the Supreme Court, who will rule this morning on whether the Scottish government can hold a second referendum without approval from Westminster. Because as the law stands, a referendum can only be called by Westminster. It's one of those retained powers, because it's constitutional. Anything that's constitutional must remain with the Crown, what's called the constitutionality of the Crown. And so basically no devolved government has the right to do this. And we've seen this in Spain or whatever. It can only be from the central government. You cannot sort of cede from the union. As it stands, it's actually an act of treason, which is a very weird thing, but that's how it is. But they'll rule today, the court. They'll probably rule that she cannot and will not have those powers. And that's going to really annoy her, because after all, she doesn't really want independence from Scotland. She wants independence from England. And that's what drives her, is that anti-English stance. And there's Jim Sillars. Anyway, getting in. Even if the Supreme Court did rule in the Scottish Government's favour, the result would have no effect, as unionists would not turn out to vote at the poll, Mr Sillars has told The Telegraph. He said that people who are pro-independence need to first build up the core vote, with polling at a level where no Westminster government could deny a referendum, and that isn't the case. He said that if a referendum instead came first, he says, I don't think we'd win. In 2014, Scots rejected ending more than 300-year-old union with England by 55% to 45%. But independence campaigners have argued the vote 2 years later for Britain to leave the EU, which the majority of Scottish voters opposed, has materially changed the circumstances. No, it hasn't. You see, the thing you have here is leaving the EU was a UK vote. and you agreed to accept the UK vote by the simple dint of voting to remain in the UK. And if you don't like it, then you should have voted to leave. But most Scots aren't stupid enough to leave. You do, of course, get your extremists, but extremists on either side are not helpful. You have there's people in Scotland, of course, there's people in Scotland who have a genuine desire for an independent Scotland. They're perfectly entitled to their opinion, of course, and they should be perfectly entitled to express their opinion. I have no comment to make on that. That is perfectly fine, legitimately held political view. No problem. Go for it, girls. But the problem you do have is that you want to push this continually. You are wasting millions upon millions of pounds, millions of man hours, at the detriment of your social care, your health care, your education. All the money that you've wasted trying to push this independence could have been spent elsewhere, and it hasn't been. And that's on top of all the millions that have gone missing mysteriously. So I think there are big plans for should be a corruption investigation. Take that on top of which, as I say, the very first thing an independent Scotland would do would be to give up its independence. And so, what are you actually voting for? A different owner, Yes, we don't like being under the yoke of the English. We want to be under the yoke of the EU. You Stockholmed into being under the yoke of someone, effectively. Anyway, the Scottish First Minister and SNP leader Nicola Sturgeon announced earlier this year that she intended to hold an advisory independence vote on October the 19th next year, but it had to be lawful and internationally recognised, and at a terrible waste of money, as I said, and the result is meaningless. But the UK government in London has said it would not grant permission for another vote, saying it should be a once-in-a-generation event, and you've had it. And under the 1998 Scotland Act, which created the Scottish Parliament and devolved some powers from Westminster, all matters relating to the union of the Kingdom of Scotland and England are reserved to the UK Parliament. And the Supreme Court will decide firstly whether it should consider the issue at all, given that no referendum bill has been introduced yet into Scottish devolved Parliament. And if it concludes it has jurisdiction, it will then decide whether an advisory referendum is a reserved matter. So the chances are that they will say, no, we can't rule because you haven't got the laws in place for us to rule on. So they then have to go and waste time, effort, money creating this rule to put, this law, which will go then be presented back to the Supreme Court, which will then rule and probably rule that it's not legal. So they'll have wasted all that time, effort and money to present something that they know they're going to lose. However, should, of course, the Supreme Court grant this today, then she can have her little advisory poll. But even then, it has no legal bearing, and there is no obligation for Scottish independence, even if they win it, because it is not a referendum on independence generated out of the Westminster Parliament, of which the SNP are a major part. So they're going to lose it. So they're going to lose, firstly, they've got three opportunities to lose. They're going to lose whether it's a jurisdictional matter. They're going to lose whether it's going to be allowed or not. Then they're going to, even if it's allowed, they're going to have a chance of losing, because no matter what the result is, the UK government won't recognise it. The only way they can win in it at all is to beat those three things and then have a legal referendum that the UK government will allow. And even then, they've got to try and win that vote, and they won't win that vote. Nicola Sturgeon needs to stop pissing money away on her fever dream of anti-Englishness and get on and do the job she was elected to do, which she's failing at every turn. Health, social care, education, crime, trade, the economy, you name it, she is turning it. She'll tell you what, she's like an anti-Midas. Everything she touches turns to shit. In 2 days of hearings in October, the Scottish Government argued that while politically significant, the vote on independence would be merely advisory and not legally binding. But the Conservative-led UK government said the court should not even engage with an abstract legal question. And most legal experts expect the court to support the view that no referendum can be held without the Westminster government's approval, which we've said. Supreme Court justices have also broken with protocol to keep their decision about Nicola Sturgeon's independence referendum case secret from lawyers. Representatives of the Scottish and UK governments will not get notification of the outcome of the case until the judges give a statement in court. And Supreme Court cases usually inform counsel of a decision 6 days before it's announced, but not this time. They are then allowed to inform their clients 24 hours before the announcement, again not this time, although there has been some exceptions. This is one of them. So today at around 1 o'clock or so, we will learn whether Nippy here has lost yet again in her continued anti-English crusade. And maybe if she does lose, she can get back and try and sort out all the problems that she's caused for Scotland. And like I say, the breakdown here, though, is that you're even getting senior figures within the SNP who are saying that they hope she loses because she cannot possibly win. And if she knows she can't possibly win, is it time to ditch this toxic leader who is so damaging for Scotland and get someone in who's capable of actually addressing the problems Scotland has? Who knows? Who knows? Anyway, I shall finish there and come up. When you have a party that was founded on the principles of fascism, it's not surprising that extremists and weirdos and the bigoted are all attracted to it. And when all these evil things are distilled into a single form and made leader, you can see why obsession with bigotry and hate rises above all else. And that is what you have in the form of Sturgeon, a woman who hates English, who hates men, who hates women, who hates everything, really. I bet she even hates herself, because inside is a bubbling cauldron of self-loathing. And she is your leader with that single obsession of handing all power in Scotland to an unelected dictatorship in Europe and making sure that Scottish people never again have the ability to create their own laws. That's what independence means to her. And in the meantime, she's wasting millions upon millions of pounds trying to achieve it. Money that could be spent in the other areas that she has destroyed. Look at justice, look at unemployment, look at the economy in whole, look at the health service, look at education, look at social care. All these things in Scotland falling apart because she is not doing her day job. She is obsessing over independence and trans rights and the damaging effects that has on women. Scotland, you need to do better. Hopefully her reign of error is closing. Thank you for listening. If you like what you hear and see on the channel, please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Ring the bell for notifications of future output. Leave a like, leave a comment, please share the video. And until next time, stay safe, stay well, don't vote for independence, and goodbye.